Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of our Ask the Expert series. Today, we will be focusing on payroll, and we are very glad to have our subject matter expert on payroll, Anna McNally, joining us here today. So, hello, Anna.
Hi, Marcel. I'm happy to be here and happy to answer any questions you have.
That's great because we have a lot of questions for you.
Okay, let's get started.
Yeah, absolutely. So again, just the idea behind these series is for us to sit down and be able to ask a subject matter expert on some questions that are both affecting employees and employers in many instances. So we have compiled some questions from both employers and employees today, and we will share them during this session. So without further ado, let's get it started. So Anna, what is the difference between a statutory and a civic holiday?
Okay, well, before I start answering your questions, I just want to say that we're on the topic of stats. So stats or public holidays, however they're referred to, are regulated by payroll legislation. So employers need to keep up with federal, provincial, or territorial legislation so that they are aware of changes because they do change. For example, we have a new holiday this month for federal, which I'm sure is one of your questions. So you have to keep up to date and constantly make sure that you're checking those links or those websites on legislation. So what's the difference between a stat and civic? Well, a statutory holiday, which is also referred to as stats or public or general holiday, is legislated at the federal, provincial, territory government level. Canada has a variety of stat holidays, and while many of these holidays are honored and acknowledged nationwide, provincial and territory legislation varies in regards to which holidays are officially recognized. And there are 5 national holidays in Canada. So the civic holiday is actually that. It's a holiday called Civic Holiday, which is actually, it's a non-stat holiday celebrated in the first Monday of August in some provinces and territories. So not every province or territory actually celebrates Civic Holiday. But it's also known by different names too. So you might not recognize the word civic holiday, but in your province or jurisdiction, you might recognize it as Provincial Day or other names like NATO Day in Nova Scotia or Terry Fox Day in Manitoba. So it's not a public holiday, unlike a stat holiday.
Okay, thank you very much. And can a statutory holiday be substituted for another day?
Yeah, that's a good question. So we have, as we know, that there are some stat holidays that may fall on a Saturday or a Sunday, for example. So we usually typically take either the day before or the day after. So that in a way is a type of a substitution. But another type of substitution is, can we take a stat holiday and take that time off in a different day? So yes and no. So there is legislation around that. So some provinces allow it, but there are conditions which may have to be met in order for that to happen. So because there are situations where the employee or employer would prefer to substitute the holiday for another day during the week. And depending on the province and the territory, substitution may or may not be permitted. But it would be under the employment and labor standards that you'd be able to find out what that would be like or what that is and what the conditions have to be met.
Okay, thank you. Now, does an employee have to use a vacation day or a statutory holiday or a personal day off for religious holidays?
Mm. All right, well, employees may ask for time off to observe religious holidays or cultural holidays, even if those holidays are not stat. Employers have a duty under the Canadian Human Rights Act to accommodate these requests for such holiday leaves. Um, Now, one way to accommodate is to allow the employee to use a vacation day or personal day, or even substitute an existing stat holiday if it's permitted under the Employment and Standard Act.
Right. So really what you're saying, Anna, is it's an agreement between the employer and the employee, and really for any day, but certainly a religious holiday, the employee can come to their employer, to their boss, or to their manager, and request that day off and use it as a substitute from another day in the calendar year.
That's right, yes.
Okay, perfect. How do holidays differ from province to province? So I'll give you an example. So I know that there are several organizations, obviously there are many, that have multiple office locations. So how does an organization decide which days and which statutory holidays specifically, or days off they provide to their employees, given the fact that some of their employees are working in various provinces with different office locations?
Hmm. Well, stat holidays are by jurisdiction. So if you have an employer with employees in multiple jurisdictions, employees in those jurisdictions may be entitled to stat pay. Where you have an employer that might have employees in like 2 or 3 different provinces, those employees are entitled, if they qualify, are entitled for that stat holiday or stat holiday pay. Now, it's usually by the greater than rule. So if you've got some employees in, let's say, the province of Manitoba and some in the province of Alberta, just for the sample, and they're different, the employer can standardize their policy so that all employees have the same holidays, provided that it meets the criteria in each jurisdiction. So what that could be is that you might have some employees in some provinces who don't typically have that holiday but are entitled because their employer allows it. So bottom line is minimum is based on jurisdiction of where the employee works, but the employer can offer greater holiday, as well as we have to also take into collective agreements. So collective agreement might also have a stipulation that they also have holidays that aren't necessarily in the minimum jurisdiction requirement.
Right. So really, what's kind of the common situation? Would an employer provide the day off for each of their employees based on where they're located? So if you're located in British Columbia, you would receive the statutory and the holidays within British Columbia. Whereas if you were in Manitoba, you would receive those respective days as well. And then you'd have your employees having various days off throughout the calendar year. Is that what's most common?
Most common is that employers usually follow what's regulated in their jurisdiction of where the employees work.
Right. Okay. All right, Anna. So the next question is, what should I know about the new Canadian holiday, National Day for Truth and Reconciliation?
Okay. The National Day for Truth and Reconciliation is a new federal stat holiday that will be observed for the first time in September or on September 30th, 2021. While the National Day for Truth and Reconciliation is not a public holiday this year, employers and employees may agree to treat it as such, and some may be required to do so if it has been negotiated into their collective agreement or employment contract.
Oh, okay. So really, it's very unique and specific to each organization whether or not they observe this holiday.
Yes, yes.
Thank you for that answer, Anna. So our final question for today is, are employees entitled to overtime pay on statutory holidays?
In most jurisdictions, if an employee works on a public or stat holiday, they will get paid 1.5 times the rate of pay. Um, Hours worked on a public holiday can also be counted for general overtime calculations, but this will depend on their jurisdiction of employment, like where they are employed.
Right. Okay. Well, thank you very much. I mean, this was really great information, and I think a lot of people are very much interested in the answers. It's rare to have access to a payroll expert. Nonetheless, to have your questions answered. So, we really appreciate your time here today, Anna. So, in the event that there are some questions that are not answered, are
Mhm.
there resources available for both employees and employers that can be checked and are updated, obviously based on some of the legislation changes?
Yes, absolutely. There's lots of information. And in fact, on our BAS website, we have links to the different provinces and territories with all kinds of legislative information, Employment Labor Act. So it's if you stay tuned to the end of this video, then we'll give you a link of where to find those. And we update them regularly, but like anything else with payroll or that's to do with legislation, you always have to make sure that you check your information so that it's most up to date. It is an employer and employee's responsibility to, before I guess making a decision or before asking for something, to check to verify that the information that they have is current, because legislation does change.
Okay. Well, thank you so much, Anna, for joining us today. And thank you for everyone that is listening. So we will continue this series and have another session, hopefully with you, Anna, and we'll continue the subject of payroll with our next edition. So thank you so much for your time today, Anna, and we will speak soon.
It's my pleasure. Thank you, Marcel.